let me ask you one last question around some of the trends that you're seeing in farming and maybe bringing your produce to the market. And then also what you're starting to notice now and learn now, I guess, is the restaurant side of things. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, anybody who's listening to this obviously has seen the price of food skyrocket.
Yeah.
You go to a restaurant, prices are kind of insane.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it's actually kind of scary.
Yeah.
Number one, why do you think that's happening? And is there a way that we would see a bit of a change of sourcing rather than from large distributors and different things and large farms? Like, how can we bring this produce to the market faster, cheaper, better, easier? And how can we create better relationships between restaurants and between essentially end users of the product being consumed and the farm?
Yeah. So I've heard probably 1,649 apps or software or SaaS designs that are trying to integrate all of that to disrupt the food system. And my feeling is that, yes, there's a space for that. There's a way to really better design how local food is moved around and just kind of organized. So yes, but there's a lot of people in that space trying to think to do that.
Yes.
Where I see where you can be really an original is that, let's say, like, I know how to grow real good food cheap. And that's how I make a profit, because I can produce food cheap that I sell at good price.
Yeah.
Now the prices are going high. So if I'm continuing in that trend, I'm gonna keep on producing cheap because I'm not connected to the fossil fuel industry. So I don't grow with fertilizers, I don't grow with pesticides, and I don't have tractors. But why would I not go and just raise my price? There's no economic sense to just not follow the trend.
Of course.
But then I'm not really in providing a solution because I'm just kind of like
riding the wave.
But what if I can grow cheap food? Cheap. I don't want to say cheap, like
not cheap quality, just above that. Yeah.
I know how to grow food at low cost of growing.
Yes.
And then I use it to feed a restaurant, which would otherwise need to buy. So then my margins are really interesting. Or a hotel, or a kindergarten, or. So now and then the profit margin is there because they'll have to follow somehow the trend
of the price of food.
Price, but then the margins are much better because you can produce at a lower cost in-house, which is, you can't scale that perhaps, but it's still.
I guess we could scale the number of farms.
Yeah, and you can show the initiatives to others. Like, I do think that the answer to the question that you're posing is that more people will start gardening. I think that's what's going to happen. That's why I started growers.
I think it was a good move.
Because that's what happens when the price of food just becomes too expensive. People are like, well, I'm just going to grow it.
Yeah. I think an economic crisis, ironically and sadly, will actually lead to the next wave and revolution, hopefully, in farming in our...
Yeah,
particularly younger people and younger people getting involved in farming.
Yeah, and then and I don't know if your people listening to the podcast are educated about this, but when you learn how food that we eat at the grocery store is produced in poor quality, it makes us sick, gluten, all of these things.
Yep.
Just like I spent 2 weeks in Europe and I was drinking wine all the time and I was eating and I just didn't get fat and I didn't get sick, and I was just kind of like, because the quality of the food there is not genetically modified, and it's just like there's real bread and there's real, there's quality.
Yep.
And you drink wine that's not full of
preservatives or other things, and yeah.
So I don't know why we're talking about that, but
well, I think that you're shining a ray of hope in my personal opinion, of the trend. Because if I look again back at the stats, seems like less and less people are getting into farming. It's more and more expensive to buy a farm, the average farm.
Yeah.
And the price of food is rising. And I think the barrier to entry right now in gardening is that a lot of people just don't know even where to start.
No, they don't.
And neither did I.
Yeah.
And I made every mistake possible, and
Yeah.
mistakes that I didn't even know were possible. I made those ones too. But I think I've learned a thing or two about what it takes to really grow food. And I think I've learned that finding the right mentors and building a right community and building relationships between the chefs and the restaurant and the people who go to that restaurant for a very specific reason, because they understand that this is supporting local farmers and local produce and is not supporting kind of the let's say the industrial way of farming, is gaining popularity. And that's where I agree with you, that I think there's a scary gap of I'm actually anticipating waves of people showing up at places like your farm and particularly
at
about
your
how
farm, because
they're going to show up. They're going to show up in droves in my farm.
Yeah.
And honestly, the biggest challenge that I have right now is having enough people who can like help them.
Yeah.
Who can like literally teach them.
Yeah, for sure.
Because there's a couple at our farm now, and including me, but there's literally too many people showing up.
Well, that's why the masterclass as a tool is like, okay, you have all the instruction that's on a video, and then everyone listening, this is how this is being done. They see it, they can apply it. And then as long as your farm manager is on board, because sometimes that happens, you have a farm manager that's like, he wants to do it that way.
Yes.
And you're like, hey, buddy, you know what? These people have been doing this for 20 years. Why don't you just do it that way?
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a reason why it's that way and not that way and not that way. It's like,
sure.
Just like when you get super good results, you can change it. But until you get there, please just follow the guidelines. I
actually very much agree.
Yeah, that you probably know what I'm talking about. You know,
I'm one of those people who started. I was naive enough to think that I could change the world, and then I realized that the world changed me, and then I realized that I could change the world, but if I just started like one literal plant and one garden bed at a time.
Yeah.
If and one podcast or one graphic, I think that. Like I'm actually considering creating a course on like how to start not growing. How can you like become a manager of a farm? Like how can you like understand the inputs and like the strategy around farming? Because I'm learning a lot more, and I actually learned this from you. It's like every step matters. Like every little detail, like how it flows in one way or out the other way. Like you changed the way I started to think about everything, and then I realized, I'm playing a giant game of Catan, where like I have to manage resources. Like it's a game. It became a game in a very different way.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden that mindset shifted the way I started investing in the farm and what I started investing in. And I think it drastically changed our results in the end.